Welcome on board, chosen one. Sit down. Breathe. Feel that strange quiet around you. That's not peace. That's the sound people make when they realize they lost control and don't know what to do next. Let's stop pretending. They said you were finished. They said you went too far. They said you didn't know your place. Look who thinks they're important now. Oh, the legend needs to bow. They'll come crawling back once reality hits. Funny how loud they were when they thought you were small. And how silent they got the moment you stopped explaining yourself. Here's the cold fact. They can't escape. Everything they tried to stop has already happened. Every door they tried to shut still opened. Every rumor they used to weaken you somehow circled back and exposed them instead. They didn't lose because you attacked. They lost because you didn't. That's what's eating them alive. You felt it before anyone said a word. The shift, the awkward pauses, the way certain people suddenly avoid eye contact or overdo the compliments like it's damage control. The way the same voices that doubted you now speak softer. Careful not to poke the fire they accidentally lit. This isn't imagination. This is aftermath. They thought pressure would break you. Instead, it trained you. They thought silence would starve you. Instead, it sharpened you. And now here you stand. Calm, unreadable. No victory speech, no revenge tour, just presence. That's what terrifies them most. You didn't need to announce the win. The universe did it for you. Behind closed doors, the conversations changed. No more jokes. No more mockery. Just concern disguised as strategy. Someone finally said it out loud. We should warn them, not because they care, because they're scared of what happens if you keep going untouched. So they sent him, the one with access, the one with influence, the one who used to speak confidently about your limits. He approached you with that practiced tone, half concern, half authority, the kind that says, I'm here to help while trying to slow you down. But here's what they didn't account for. When they begged him to intervene, when they pleaded with him to reach you before things went too far, he didn't argue. He didn't hesitate. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a hopeful one. The kind of smile you give when you already read the final page and know there's no rewrite coming. When they asked if he could stop what was coming, he gave them two words that drained the color from their faces. Too late. Before we go any further, chosen one, tap the like button and subscribe. Not for me, for the mission. This message only gets louder when you help push it forward. Now, let's talk about why too late hit them like a punch to the throat. Because they know history. They've seen this pattern before. Not in movies, in real life, in offices, families, industries, movements. The quiet one who took the hits, learned the system, and walked away without begging for approval. The one everyone underestimated because arrogance makes people blind. Think about every time in the past someone laughed right before losing everything. The company that mocked the competitor they couldn't see coming. The friend group that iced someone out only to watch them thrive without them. The gatekeepers who ignored a name until that name was suddenly everywhere. This always ends the same way. The enemy overplays. The chosen one underreacts. Then reality does the talking. What you're feeling now isn't anger anymore. It's closure. That's why you're dangerous. Anger is loud. Closure is efficient. You don't need revenge because the universe already handled the math. Every action they took stacked the outcome against them. And now they're staring at the bill. They're begging for warnings because warnings are the last illusion of control. If they can say, we tried, they can sleep at night. But the truth is brutal and simple. You outgrew the phase where they mattered. The storm already passed through you. What they're facing now is the silence after it. The part where the damage becomes undeniable and there's no one left to blame. You're not chasing them. You're not proving anything. You're standing in your power while they scramble for explanations. That's the victory they never planned for. That's why his smile scared them. He saw what they refused to accept. This wasn't sudden. This was earned. And now, chosen one, the world doesn't speak to you the same way anymore. Not because you demanded respect, because you became undeniable. Too late isn't an insult. It's a verdict. Now, pause right here. This is the moment where people who are only curious quietly drift away. And the ones this message was actually meant for lean in closer, because from this point on there's no more hype, no more dramatic setup. What comes next is the part they were begging him to stop you from hearing: the breakdown, the sequence, the exact steps that explain why they panicked, why warning suddenly mattered, and why he knew it was already too late to interfere. So listen carefully, chosen one. If you felt that strange pull to stay, if something in your chest tightened when you heard too late, if this doesn't feel like content, but like confirmation, then you already know this isn't random. The universe doesn't waste messages on people who aren't ready to carry them. Drop 888 in the comments if you're still here on purpose. Not for luck, not for trends, but as a signal that you're locked in, steady, and willing to see the full picture unfold without flinching. This next part isn't loud. It's precise. Step by step, layer by layer. And if you are who this was meant for, you won't even consider clicking away. You'll feel that quiet pressure telling you to stay until the end. Because walking away now would feel unfinished. Good. Let's begin. Number 1, the smile that slammed the door shut forever. Warnings are for people who still have options. You didn't. That smile wasn't friendly. It wasn't smug either. It was final. The kind of smile you see when a conversation is already over and the other side just hasn't realized it yet. He didn't soften his voice. He didn't explain himself. He didn't try to sound wise or merciful. He smiled the way someone does when the outcome has already been processed, accepted, and sealed by the universe. Too late. That wasn't arrogance. That was accuracy. People keep misunderstanding that moment because they think power looks loud. They expect yelling, threats, speeches, dramatic warnings. But real power is calm because it doesn't need permission. And that's exactly why that smile hit them harder than any insult ever could. It confirmed something they were desperately trying to deny. You were no longer reachable. They thought a warning would slow you down. They thought a conversation would reset the board. They believed there was still a lever they could pull, a button they could press, a guilt string they could tug. That belief alone tells you everything. They only try to warn people they can still control. But control left the room a long time ago. You didn't cross the line in one dramatic step. You crossed it quietly. One decision at a time. One boundary held. One reaction denied. One moment where you chose discipline over drama. That's what they missed. While they were watching for explosions, you were becoming untouchable. And here's the part that messes with their heads. You didn't become dangerous by attacking. You became dangerous by finishing your transformation without asking for approval. That's why the warning came late. That's why it felt desperate. Because the universe doesn't announce turning points, it lets people realize them when it's already inconvenient. Think about what too late really meant in that moment. It wasn't about time. It was about access. They were shut out. No more influence, no more leverage, no more ability to rewrite the story. The version of you they knew no longer existed, and the new one didn't require their understanding. That's why his smile carried weight. He could see it. He could feel it. He knew that whatever they were trying to prevent had already matured. You weren't in the middle of becoming. You were done. The enemy hates this phase because it offers them nothing to fight. There's no argument to win, no emotion to exploit, no chaos to provoke, just silence, clarity, and motion. That's when they start spiraling. That's when they replay conversations in their heads, wondering where exactly they lost you. And let's answer the question sitting in your chest right now. No, you didn't miss a step. No, you didn't go too far. And no, you don't owe anyone an explanation for evolving past the version of you that was convenient for them. The moment they sent someone to warn you was the moment they admitted defeat. People don't send messengers when they're winning. They send them when they're behind and running out of moves. That smile wasn't cruel. It was honest. It said, you're not talking to who you think you're talking to anymore. It said the outcome you're afraid of already happened. It said the universe finished the work while you were busy underestimating it. They wanted regret. They wanted hesitation. They wanted you to look conflicted. Instead, they saw peace. And peace terrifies people who survive on control. Here's the brutal truth they don't want spoken out loud. You became unstoppable the moment you stopped needing them to see you. The moment you stopped explaining your intentions, the moment you let your silence do the talking. That's why too late felt like a sentence, not a phrase. You didn't win because you outplayed them in public. You won because you outgrew them in private. While they were focused on appearances, you were building resilience. While they were planning responses, you were removing emotional access. While they were watching your moves, you were changing the game. And now they're left staring at the aftermath, asking how it happened so quietly. This is where chosen ones often hesitate. This is where doubt tries one last time. You might be thinking, should I slow down? Should I soften? Should I hear them out? That question alone proves how far you've come. Because the old you would have already bent, the new you observes the question and keeps moving. Understand this clearly. The universe doesn't bring warnings when it wants you to stop. It brings confirmations when it wants you to continue. That smile was confirmation. Not for them. For you. It was the final acknowledgement that you are no longer available for manipulation, guilt, or reversal. That the door they kept half open in their minds was already locked, bolted, and forgotten. And here's the part that should make you stand taller. You didn't do this to hurt anyone. You did this to survive, to grow, to become precise instead of reactive, powerful instead of loud. They're begging for warnings now because they waited too long to take you seriously. They mistook patience for weakness, silence for confusion, kindness for compliance. And by the time they realized the truth, the universe had already moved you past the stage where their opinions mattered. So no, he didn't say too late with regret. He said it like someone announcing the end of an era and chosen one you are standing on the other side of it. Number 2, they only send messengers when the war is already lost. Warnings don't arrive before power rises. They arrive when power can no longer be stopped. Here's a truth most people never notice until it's too late. When someone is truly weak, nobody gathers, nobody whispers, nobody sends intermediaries. They don't debate strategy or weigh options. Weakness doesn't trigger concern. It triggers neglect. People step over it and move on. Messengers only appear after something has already gone wrong. That's the part they don't want you to understand. The very act of sending someone to warn you is an admission. It says without words, this has moved beyond our control. If you were still manageable, they would have laughed. If you were still predictable, they would have ignored you. The moment diplomacy enters the room, force has already failed. Think about it. Nobody negotiates with something harmless. Imagine this. A small fire sparks in a corner. People walk past it. Someone might even joke about it. But when that fire grows into something that can't be stomped out, suddenly alarms go off. Suddenly there are meetings. Suddenly someone says, we need to talk to it before it spreads. That's when the messengers run in hoping words can do what action no longer can. You were never warned when you were quiet and struggling. No one intervened when you were overlooked. No one cared when you were absorbing the hits. That should tell you everything. Concern didn't arrive because they suddenly cared. It arrived because the universe shifted the balance and they felt it. Here's another truth that hits harder the longer you sit with it. Warnings are not protection. They're damage control. They don't warn you for your sake. They warn you because they're afraid of what happens next if you keep going untouched. That's why the timing feels strange. That's why it comes late. That's why it feels urgent and awkward and forced. Because it is. By the time they ask you to stop, you've already become what they feared. Ask yourself this honestly. If you were still lost, confused or dependent, would anyone have shown up? If you were still chasing approval, would anyone have bothered to intervene? Of course not. They intervene when silence becomes dangerous. When momentum becomes irreversible. Imagine a train that's been quietly gaining speed for miles. No sirens, no announcements. People standing near the tracks barely notice it at first. But once it's close enough to shake the ground, that's when panic hits. That's when someone waves their arms and shouts, hoping the train can still be reasoned with. But momentum doesn't negotiate. That's why he smiled. He wasn't amused. He was aware. He could see what you've been building while everyone else was distracted. Discipline, detachment, precision, a version of you that no longer reacts on cue. A version that moves forward whether or not the room agrees. They thought you were still at the beginning. He knew you were already past the point of no return. Here's a quote they'd never say out loud, but feel deeply. We should have paid attention sooner. That regret is baked into every late warning. And regret always wears the mask of concern. Another metaphor they hate. Imagine someone ignoring cracks in a wall for years. Small signs, tiny fractures, easy to dismiss. Then one day the wall starts leaning and suddenly they bring in experts, inspectors, negotiators. Not because they care about the wall, because they're scared of what happens when it collapses. You are that wall to them now. And collapse in this case doesn't mean destruction. It means exposure. It means the truth becoming visible. It means their influence ending. People don't send messengers to stop growth. They send them to slow consequences. You might be wondering something right now. If it's already over, why do they still try? Because denial is stubborn. Because ego hates finality. Because part of them still hopes you'll hesitate if they frame it as concern instead of fear. They're betting on your empathy, on your past self, on the version of you that used to second guesses and self-blame. They're hoping you'll confuse kindness with obligation. But here's the shift. You can hear the warning without obeying it. You can understand their panic without absorbing it. You can acknowledge the messenger without reopening the door. That's power. Imagine this. A chessboard after checkmate. The pieces are still there. The board looks the same, but the game is over. Any further move is just noise. That's where you are now. They're still talking because they don't want to accept the ending. And the universe doesn't send messengers to stop chosen ones. It sends confirmations to let them know they're aligned. Here's another quote for the enemy to choke on. You didn't move too fast. They moved too slow. That's the real story. And it stings because it removes the illusion that you did something wrong. They weren't ready for you to mature. Without their permission. They weren't ready for you to detach without bitterness. They weren't ready for you to win quietly. That's why diplomacy showed up late. That's why warnings sound hollow. That's why the messenger smiled instead of pleaded. He knew there was nothing left to negotiate. One last image. Imagine trying to stop a river after it has already carved its path. You can stand there with signs, speeches, and warnings. The water doesn't care. It flows where gravity takes it, not out of malice, out of nature. You've reached that stage. So, when messengers appear now, understand what it really means. It's not a sign to retreat. It's proof that what you built in silence worked, that your transformation didn't need applause, that the universe moved pieces long before they noticed the board changing. He smiled because he knew the truth. This wasn't a warning you needed. This was confirmation that it was already over. Number 3, they miscalculated the clock and that mistake sealed everything. They didn't lose because you moved fast. They lost because they waited too long. This is where their fear really comes from. Not from what you did, but from when you did it. They genuinely believed they had time. Time to watch, time to measure, time to step in if things got uncomfortable. They treated your transformation like a slow experiment, something they could monitor from a safe distance and interrupt whenever it suited them. They watched you struggle and took notes instead of offering help. They observed your pain like it was data on a screen, not a human process. Every quiet moment, every step back, every pause you took, they labeled it weakness. Silence became defeat in their minds. Patience became hesitation. Withdrawal became surrender. That assumption was fatal. Imagine this. Someone sees a seed in the ground and laughs because nothing is happening on the surface. They don't realize roots are spreading fast underneath. By the time the ground cracks, it's already over. Pulling it out isn't an option anymore. That was you. They thought you were stuck. You were stabilizing. They thought you were confused. You were recalibrating. They thought you were losing momentum. You were storing it. Here's the quote that keeps them awake. Now, the most dangerous phase is when nothing seems to be happening. They missed that phase completely. They mistook restraint for weakness because they only understand noise. They mistook discipline for fear because they've never had any. Now the shift is visible. The energy is different. Your presence lands heavier. Conversations change tone. People second guesses how they speak to you. And the terror in their eyes doesn't come from imagination. It comes from realizing there's nothing left to stop. You didn't rush. You didn't announce. You didn't ask permission. You finished. Another truth they hate. Completion doesn't ask for approval. That's why they're scrambling now. That's why they talk about timing, warnings, and damage control. They waited for signs. And by the time the signs appeared, the process was done. Think of it like this. They kept checking the calendar while you were building the outcome. They kept asking when while you were becoming ready. And now they're staring at something fully formed, trying to rewind a clock that already ran out. They thought they had time. They were wrong. Is the truth finally landed? Fear always disguises itself as concern when control starts slipping. That meeting wasn't about helping you. It was about calming themselves. They gathered in that tight little circle, nodding at each other, pretending this was thoughtful, measured, responsible. In reality, it was panic wearing a professional mask. Every sentence started with "we should" and ended with fear they refused to name. They reframed everything to feel better. Fear became care. Panic became friendship. Control became protection. That's how people justify interference when they're no longer relevant. They told themselves they were doing the right thing because admitting the truth would have meant admitting they were late. Someone suggested talking to you casually at first like it was just another option on the table. Someone else pushed harder, insisting an intervention could still work. That word matters. Intervention. It only shows up when people believe something has already slipped beyond them. Imagine a group of people standing around a door they forgot to lock, arguing about the best way to stop what already left the building. That was the energy in that room. And he sat there quietly. No objections, no urgency, just calm. He let them talk, let them plan, let them believe they still had agency. Because sometimes the most honest thing you can do is let people finish lying to themselves. Then they looked at him directly, not for advice, but for reassurance. The kind that says, "Tell us we still matter." That's when he spoke. Too late. No explanation, no drama. Just two words that changed the temperature of the room. The kind of cold that doesn't come from silence, but from realization. You could feel it sink in. The pause, the eyes shifting. The moment everyone understood what he meant, but didn't want to accept it. Here's the part that cuts deepest. He wasn't being cruel. He was being accurate. Meetings don't stop outcomes. They only confirm them. That room went cold because reality finally arrived, and reality doesn't negotiate. They weren't discussing a possibility anymore. They were acknowledging an ending. They didn't lose control in that meeting. They discovered it had already been gone. Number 5, you were the outcome, not the experiment. You don't warn results. You study them after they've already changed everything. This is the moment the illusion finally collapsed. The second it clicked, the air shifted. You were never the project they thought they were monitoring. You were never the test case, the trial run, the slow process they could interrupt halfway through if it got uncomfortable. You were the conclusion. They misunderstood the entire situation because they assumed growth needs supervision. They thought transformation stays fragile until approved. They believed progress requires permission. That's why they treated you like something unfinished, something they could still poke, question, redirect. They were wrong at the foundation level. You weren't unfolding. You had already arrived quietly, completely without needing applause. And that realization hit them like a delayed shock. The kind that doesn't scream, but freezes you in place. Imagine scientists arguing over a formula only to realize the equation already solved itself. Imagine critics debating potential while the outcome is already printed, published, and irreversible. That's what this was. They were discussing hypotheticals while standing inside the result. Here's the truth they weren't ready to face. Processes can be warned. Outcomes cannot. Once something becomes real, warnings stop being useful. You don't warn a storm after it makes landfall. You don't caution a verdict after it's delivered. You don't negotiate with something that already worked. That's why their concern felt awkward, late, misaligned. It was aimed at a version of you that no longer existed. They were speaking to the past while standing in your present. You didn't need guidance because you already had clarity. You didn't need restraint because you already had control. You didn't need permission because the universe had already moved the pieces. And here's the part that should settle something deep inside you. You didn't become dangerous by rushing. You became dangerous by finishing. That's why results don't need warnings. They deliver them. Number 6, they're not scared you'll fall. They're scared you'll finish. They never feared your collapse. They feared your completion. Let's strip the lie down to the bone. They're not worried about you self-destructing. That story is just cover. If they truly believed you were headed for ruin, they would have stepped back and watched. People don't panic over something they expect to fail. They wait. They observe. They let gravity do the work. What terrifies them is the opposite. They're afraid you'll succeed without them. Afraid you'll fully step into what you've been turning into while they're still stuck protecting old titles, old power, old relevance. Your success isn't loud, and that's what makes it unbearable for them. It doesn't need their approval. It doesn't orbit their authority. It doesn't ask for a seat at their table. Imagine this. A flashlight in a dark room feels powerful until the sun comes up. The flashlight didn't break. It just stopped mattering. That's what your presence does to everything they thought gave them influence. Not by attacking it, by outgrowing it. Here's the quote. They don't want to hear. Your growth exposes what they never built. That's the real fear. When you stand fully formed, calm, focused, and unbothered, their shortcuts become obvious. Their noise becomes embarrassing. Their posturing becomes small. They're scared because your success forces comparison, and comparison always reveals truth. You might wonder, why do they keep framing this as concern? Because fear never admits itself honestly. It disguises. It pretends. It reframes. Saying, "We're worried about you," sounds better than saying, "You're about to make us obsolete." Another image they hate. Imagine a gatekeeper realizing the gate no longer matters because people found another way through. No explosion, no rebellion, just irrelevance. Quiet, permanent. That's what you represent now. You're not dangerous because you're reckless. You're dangerous because you're complete. And when you fully become what you've been building toward, everything they relied on for power stops working in your presence. That's the fear. Not your fault, your arrival. Number 7, they studied the shadow while the real you rebuilt everything. They tracked your noise and missed your rewiring. This is one of their biggest mistakes, and it's almost embarrassing when you see it clearly. They genuinely believed they were watching you, tracking patterns, monitoring behavior, studying reactions. They thought they had eyes on the whole situation. What they were really watching was a mask you no longer lived behind. They focused on surface behavior because that's all they know how to read. Tone, timing, output, volume, the obvious stuff. Meanwhile, the real work was happening where their tools don't reach inside, quiet, structural, permanent. They thought you went calm because you were tired. You went calm because you were finished reacting. They thought you slowed down because you lost confidence. You slowed down because you stopped wasting energy. They thought silence meant confusion. It meant clarity. Here's the quote that explains everything. They measured movement while you changed direction. That's why their data failed. That's why their predictions collapsed. You didn't evolve louder. You evolved deeper. Imagine this. Someone watches a building from the outside and thinks nothing is happening because there's no noise, no construction chaos, no visible change. They don't realize the foundation is being reinforced underground. By the time the structure rises, it's already unshakable. That's what you did. You changed frequency while they measured volume. You rewired values while they tracked habits. You replaced instincts while they analyzed reactions. Those shifts don't show up on charts. They don't trigger alarms. They only become obvious when it's too late to intervene. Another truth they can't swallow. Calm is invisible to people addicted to chaos. They mistake peace for passivity because they've never experienced control without force. You might wonder how they missed something so big. Simple. They were watching who you used to be. They never updated their model. And once they realized the version they understood was gone, the replacement was already complete. That's why their warnings feel off. That's why their timing is wrong. They're responding to echoes. They weren't watching you. They were watching a ghost. And by the time they noticed the real you, the rebuild was already done. Number 8, your silence wasn't surrender. It was the perfect cover. They mistook your quiet for obedience. That mistake cost them everything. This is where their misjudgment turns fatal. They expected your transformation to look dramatic. Rage, collapse, public rebellion, something loud enough to react to. When none of that happened, they relaxed. They told themselves you had settled, accepted your place, learned your lesson. Silence made them comfortable. They saw peace and assumed defeat, focus and assumed resignation, withdrawal and assumed submission. That's how people who rely on noise interpret quiet. They think if you're not fighting them, you're folding. Here's the truth they missed. Silence is the safest place to become dangerous. While they were busy congratulating themselves for handling you, you were removing their influence piece by piece. No arguments to exploit, no emotions to trigger, no chaos to manipulate. Imagine a predator that only hunts movement. The moment the prey goes still, it disappears from the predator's awareness. Not because it's gone, but because it no longer signals weakness. That's what your silence did. You stopped feeding their attention economy. Another image, a chess player who stops reacting to feints and starts controlling the board. No panic, no rush, just position. That's the phase you entered. And they didn't recognize it because it didn't match their idea of resistance. You might ask, why didn't they sense the shift? Because silence doesn't announce power. It reveals it later. Loud people mistake peace for permission. They think quiet means manageable. And here's the quote that settles it. By the time they feel threatened, you're already ungovernable. That's exactly what happened. They thought they were managing behavior. In reality, they lost access. Silence wasn't retreat. It was camouflage. While they relaxed, you completed the transformation. Number 9, reality started bending. And they don't have a theory for it. They can't trace the source, but they can't deny the outcome. This is where their confusion turns into panic. They don't see the cause, but they're surrounded by the effects. Things start going your way in ways that don't make sense to them. Situations resolve themselves. Obstacles soften. Doors that were locked for years suddenly open without resistance. People who once blocked you now cooperate, sometimes without even realizing why. And that's what breaks them. Because their entire sense of control depends on models, predictable inputs, measurable effort, clear chains of cause and effect. But you moved outside of that system. Reality started responding to you differently. And there's no spreadsheet for that. Imagine this, a rigged game where the rules suddenly stop applying to one player. Everyone else is still rolling dice, still begging for permission, still waiting their turn. Meanwhile, you walk straight through because the system recognizes you as something else entirely. Here's the quote they hate the most. When outcomes change without explanation, power has shifted. They can feel it. They just can't prove it. You're not forcing doors open. They're unlocking themselves. You're not convincing people. They're adjusting. You're not fighting resistance. It's dissolving. And because they can't see how, they assume something must be wrong. So, they panic. They call meetings to reassure each other. They swap theories. They replay old assumptions. They send warnings hoping words can slow what momentum already finished. All because they can't accept the simplest explanation. You are the phenomenon, not luck, not coincidence, not timing, alignment, completion, presence. The universe responds to things that are settled, not things that beg. Another image they don't want to face. Imagine gravity suddenly pulling in a new direction. You don't argue with it. You adapt or you fall. That's what's happening around you. They can't explain it because explanation would require admitting they were wrong about you from the start. And that's the part they'll never say out loud. Number 10. He recognized the end because you turned wounds into weapons. He didn't see survival. He saw conversion. That's why he knew it was over before anyone else dared to say it. Not because you endured what they did to you, but because of what you did with it. Plenty of people survive damage. Very few metabolize it. You didn't carry the pain around like a badge or a wound. You broke it down, extracted the lesson, and discarded the rest. Betrayal didn't harden you. It trained you. Isolation didn't weaken you. It clarified you. Every hit they thought would slow you down became raw material. Not motivation, not rage. Material, something usable, something structural. That's the part they missed. Imagine someone throwing fire at steel, expecting it to melt, only to realize they're tempering it instead. Every attempt to break you refined you. Every exclusion simplified you. Every loss removed excess weight. By the time they checked again, you weren't injured. You were engineered. Here's the quote that explains why he smiled. Anger keeps you tied to the past. Indifference cuts the rope. You're not fueled by revenge anymore. Revenge needs an audience. It needs emotion. It needs attachment. You moved past all of that. That's what made you untouchable. They expected bitterness. You showed precision. They expected obsession. You showed focus. They expected you to circle the wound forever. You closed it and kept walking. Not loudly, completely. Another image they can't accept. Imagine a parasite realizing the host no longer needs it. No hatred, no fight, just absence. That's what your indifference feels like to them. Not punishment, eraser. He saw it instantly because he's seen this pattern before. He knows the moment someone stops trying to prove anything, the game ends. The moment someone no longer needs validation, leverage disappears. The moment emotion stops driving decisions, control dies. They didn't lose you when they hurt you. They lost you when you stopped caring. That's why he knew there was nothing left to warn. You weren't on the edge. You were already past it. Past revenge, past anger, past the need to be understood. What stood in front of him wasn't a survivor. It was a finished product. Number 11. You left the game and that broke the whole system. The moment you stopped needing their approval, their power evaporated. This is the truth they are desperate to keep contained. The one thing they hope never spreads, never gets named, never gets copied. You didn't beat them at their own game. You opted out. You disconnected from the systems they rely on to feel important. Their hierarchies of worth, their rankings, their invisible scoreboards, where approval is currency and validation is leverage. You saw it for what it was and quietly stepped away. No announcement, no rebellion, just withdrawal. And that single move shattered everything. They can handle competition. They can handle rebellion. They can even handle resistance. What they can't handle is irrelevance, because systems of control only work on people who still believe the system matters. Here's the quote they never want repeated. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't need to win. Once you realize their opinions had zero impact on your reality, access was gone. No guilt hooks, no fear levers, no praise traps, nothing to pull. Imagine a casino where one player suddenly stands up and walks out with their peace intact. No rage, no loss, just clarity. The casino doesn't collapse because of cheating. It collapses because the illusion stops working. That's what you did. You stopped measuring yourself by standards designed to keep you chasing. You stopped explaining yourself to people who benefited from misunderstanding you. You stopped performing. And when performance ends, the audience panics. You might wonder why this scares them more than anger ever did. Because anger keeps you engaged. Anger still plays the game. Opting out ends it. Another image they hate. Imagine a puppet realizing the strings don't actually hold them up. The moment the puppet stands on its own, the puppeteer becomes useless. That's the terror. Not that you'll attack, not that you'll expose them loudly, but that others will notice you living unaffected, untouched, unbothered, that your example will spread. Because once someone sees it's possible to leave the game entirely, the whole structure starts to rot. That's why they're afraid. You didn't fight the system. You walked away from it. Number 12. There's no rescue team because you're not a mistake. No one stops what they secretly respect. This is the part that really unsettles them even more than your progress. No one at your level is rushing in to interfere. No emergency calls, no urgent interventions, no last-minute authority figures trying to pull you back into line. And that silence is intentional. People who actually understand power don't try to stop it. They observe it. While the desperate ones beg for someone to warn you, the ones who operate in the same air you do, are watching closely, studying patterns, not to copy you, but to understand what shifted. You're not a problem to solve for them. You're evidence. Here's the quote that explains everything. You don't interrupt alignment, you learn from it. That's why no one serious is stepping in. They recognize something finished when they see it. They know when a process has crossed into inevitability. Imagine engineers watching a structure that's already load-bearing. They don't panic. They don't argue. They test it quietly and accept the result. That's what's happening around you now. The people who matter aren't trying to interfere because interference would be pointless. The ones begging him to warn you are operating from fear, not insight. They still believe there's a way to rewind, that someone can swoop in and restore the old balance. But rescue missions are for people who are lost. You're not lost. Another image they don't want to face. Imagine a rocket already past escape velocity. You don't chase it. You don't redirect it. You acknowledge it's gone and adjust your expectations. That's the stage you're in. You might wonder, why doesn't anyone powerful try to stop me? Because they don't see danger. They see completion. They see someone who's already integrated the lesson, the loss, and the growth. You don't stop what already works. And that's the reality the panicked ones have to live with. There is no intervention coming, no authority figure arriving, no hand reaching out to pull you back because there's nothing to fix. You're not a warning. You're proof. Number 13. Too late. Wasn't a warning. It was the final diagnosis. You don't rescue someone who already crossed the threshold. Let this land properly because this is where the story locks in. You don't need saving. You never did. That assumption was the last lie they told themselves to feel useful. Saving is for people who are drowning. You weren't drowning. You were shedding weight. What you needed was space, distance, silence, room to become without interruption. And that's exactly what happened. While they were busy mistaking your absence for weakness, they thought stepping back meant you were losing ground. In reality, you were leaving the battlefield entirely. Too late. That phrase keeps echoing because it wasn't said for drama. It was said because there was nothing left to interfere with, no open wound to exploit, no confusion to amplify, no dependency to pull on. You already stabilized. You already integrated. You already moved past the stage where outside voices could reach your core. Imagine this. Someone keeps trying to stop a surgery that already healed the patient. They're arguing about tools and timing while the scar has already closed. That's how ridiculous their concern looks now. Too far gone. Not in the way they mean it. They say it like loss, like damage, like you slipped past the point of return, but they're accidentally telling the truth. You are past the point of return. Back to needing approval. Back to seeking validation. Back to shrinking yourself to keep others comfortable. Here's the quote they choke on. You didn't go too far. You went forward. That's what they can't handle. Forward movement that doesn't glance back. Too evolved. You're not reacting anymore. You're choosing. You're not proving. You're executing. The old emotional hooks don't work because the nervous system they relied on doesn't run your decisions anymore. You metabolize the damage instead of orbiting it. That's evolution, not enlightenment, not revenge. Function. Imagine a predator trying old tactics on prey that learned the pattern. The predator doesn't get angry. It gets irrelevant. That's what evolution does. It makes old strategies useless. Too free. Freedom scares people who live off leverage because freedom can't be negotiated with. You don't bargain with someone who doesn't need anything from you. You don't threaten someone who already accepted loss and kept moving. Your freedom isn't loud, but it's final. You can feel it in how little explanation you need now. In how clean your decisions feel. Another truth they don't want spoken. Freedom looks like danger to people who depend on control. That's why the warnings got louder right as you got quieter. Too untouchable. Not because you built walls. Because there's nothing left inside you that reacts on command. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to be agreed with. You don't even need to be liked. That's what makes you unreachable. Access requires attachment. And attachment died quietly. Picture someone trying to start a fire with wet wood. They keep striking the match harder, convinced effort will fix it. They don't realize the conditions are gone. That's what their attempts look like now. Too late isn't cruelty. It's closure. It means the version of you that could be warned no longer exists. It means the stage where outside interference mattered is finished. It means the universe already granted you what you actually needed, not what they thought you needed. You didn't need saving. You needed space to become. And you took it too late, too far gone, too evolved, too free, too untouchable. And this time those words aren't a threat, they're a fact. And now we close this exactly where it belongs. Not with noise, not with warnings, but with clarity. Everything that needed to happen already did. You're not on the edge anymore. You're standing past it, steady, aware, and finished with explanations. What they feared wasn't your fault. It was this moment right here where you no longer need permission to move forward. If this message hit, lock it in. Like the video, subscribe to stay aligned with this path, and drop 88 in the comments to mark that you're still standing and still moving. Share this with the one person who needs to hear it. Too late was never an ending.